Flanagan. I'm with Common Cause. I am the executive director of our Colorado office, and formerly I worked with our national election reporting team, which I still participate in. So I had the good fortune to work with verified voting, Pam Smith and Kidrick that we heard before, as we in Colorado are working on our legislation to both do paper records of our ballots when we were in the process of purchasing new machines, and also creating an audit provision for Colorado, and also was able to work with some of the other states as they were working on similar legislation. So I'll really pick up a lot where the representative left off in terms of some of the experiences we had in moving legislation forward and putting some of these ideas into practice. I guess there's a couple of things that I want to frame. One, let's not lose sight of the big picture. I think we're all here for the same reason. We want people to participate in our elections. And we realize that in order to do that, we've got to rebuild the confidence of the electorate, because that has really been shaken. And I think we all sort of share that same goal. I think we also share the same goal of having accurate elections. And that has certainly continues to be a challenge, I think, in these discussions, certainly from the perspective of people who run our elections, our election administrators, take that responsibility very seriously. And I think that's important as advocates and as citizens who care about this, to really remember that. Because I think some people walk into this calling that into question at every angle. And I argue that not everyone is corrupt. Not everyone wants to see our elections be falsified or fraudulent. Most of us are here for the same purpose, to have accurate elections, and I think that's an important starting point. The two other big picture things, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I know that's been said a couple of times. There's been a lot of good work in the states. You've heard here at the table and over the last day or so that there's been a lot of work on audits, and that work continues. I mean, even over the last several hours, I've learned a lot more about how we can do our audits more effectively. I'm challenged by some of the analysis, but I know we can do it more effectively. And the other big picture point is that we are better together. That was a big theme that we heard last night, and I think we should all remember that, because we all are not experts in everything, but we bring a lot to the table. So in Colorado, we worked on our legislation in 2005. The good news was, I think we were, as we are today, there was a lot of momentum that said it's time to have verified elections. I think our Secretary of State at the time now, the chair of the Election Assistance Commission, Netta Davison, sort of got that it was time that we had a paper record of our electronic voting machines. The audit was definitely a bigger challenge, but I think doing both of those efforts together helped us out. I think the key is having a legislator who gets it, someone who's willing to be a champion and to fight hard, because it is very complicated in order to make this kind of legislation succeed. And the legislator who sponsored our bill, Senator Ken Gordon, was constantly asking who else needs to be at the table in order for this to be successful. So we focused on really having election administrators at the table, both from our Secretary of State's office, but our county clerks, our local administrators, who really understood the complexity of the elections process, the costs of the equipment, the staff time, a lot of the presentation that we heard on the last panel. Because while in some cases maybe the cost is minimal to the audits, there are so many cards on that bulletin board that our election administrators need to meet, that we've got to take that into consideration anytime we're bringing something forward. And then the advocates. I think that was definitely a role that I was fortunate to play, was to bring in the expertise of folks who were working from the outside, recognizing sort of that loss of confidence in the electorate, the folks who were generating lots of letters to legislators, and being able to respond to those needs. And I think one thing that our group, which met for hours upon hours upon hours to try to put our legislation together, that we all had to learn that we brought something to the table, that we had something valuable, that our statisticians, as complicated as some of the theories may have been, were right on and had the right message and played a crucial role to figuring out what our processes should be. And the details, very, very complex. So I think those are some of the big picture challenges that we as a community face as we were trying to pass this legislation. We're balancing those trust issues. Wow, running out of time. The challenges we saw as a group were the costs of our elections, the time that it would take to complete an audit, and the public perceptions of whether or not we trusted our elections, and where that would we lose confidence from the election administrator's perspective in whether or not our elections were accurate. The outcomes of our 2005 legislation are in your book. We had 1% of all of the machines that were used in the election, 1% of all of the machines in each county to account for at least 2 races. It was a random selection within 24 hours, and then the results of the audit were to be posted on our Secretary of State's website, and all of the audit were to be done within the 10 days of the canvass that our election administrators had to complete. If there was a discrepancy, they would try to explain it by voter error, and then if there was more, they had to do an additional investigation. Since that time, and this earlier panelist or someone commented that we've got to evolve, maybe that was you, Arlene, we've got to evolve our processes and understand that we'll learn from our experiences. So in 2005 was our first audit, and 10 of our counties found discrepancies, and we had recounts in 10 counties. All of those discrepancies were on optical scan machines. So again, a lot of the perception are that the electronic voting machines are the problems, but in fact, even as we saw in the last study, oftentimes it's the optical scan systems. In 2006, the advocates joined forces with our election administrators and fought for more funding for our election officials. Because in Colorado, our counties are not reimbursed at any reasonable amount from the state, and there's a lot of requirements. Again, that was a good relationship building opportunity. We helped get them a little more money, not enough. In 2007, this last legislative session, we changed our audit requirement from 1% to 5%. We now require a more detailed audit log. This, I think, is an important message I want to say when you're thinking about legislation. If you just require the audit to be reported back, to just say, well, we counted on these machines, this number of votes, and this was the outcome, it doesn't really tell the story of what discrepancies were found. Was it a voter error marking a ballot? Was it actually a machine calculation problem? The detail of the audit really needs to be expressed, and I think that's a requirement that sometimes gets looked over. The other new thing, and I'll end on this note, and I think this is because a lot of the discussions that we can do a better statistical analysis that can be more efficient in many ways, is we now allow our Secretary of State to approve, quote unquote, a proven statistical sampling plan that will achieve a higher level of confidence. The reason we're at 1% and then 5% is because it's something that people understand. And I am, I'm the first to admit that a lot of this conversation on how to do the statistical analysis is over my head. So I think that's a constant challenge, and if we're going to do legislative change, but this allows it to come into our state. If someone can get that going.
Great. Thanks to everyone. We'll now open it up to questions. I do want to make the observation that the Pew Trust and election line, as part of the overall Make Voting Work initiative, is very interested in the concept of audits. There's going to be some research money made available over the next couple of years, and I think some of that will be going to audits. One of the questions that I'd be interested in hearing the panelists talk about, or maybe we get from the questions, is we had the why, we've had the how, we've had the what, but I guess that my question, which ties all three of those together, is what do you do with the results of an audit? Are they a good housekeeping stamp of approval for the results so that an individual voter is confident that the vote total reflects what actually happened on election day? Is it a management tool for election administrators so that they can identify problem areas, either issue areas or geographic areas, precincts, poll workers, and the like that need addressing? Is it, to sort of ventilate the downside, is it a source of stories for journalists who want to look for yet another story of why the system is broken and it doesn't work? I think the truth is it's a little bit of all of those. But I think in order to think about how you design an audit, what you do, how you choose your sample, who you partner with, you have to have at some point an eye on the ball at the end so that you know, well, what will we do with this audit once we're done? Will we just produce a report that starts gathering dust the minute it's finished? or is it something that people can use as a tool either to assure themselves that the vote that was counted are the votes that were cast, or that the system is moving toward being a smoothly functioning system that voters can have confidence in, not just in a given election, but overall?
Ways that we address that, and this again I think was born out of the collaboration with our election administrators, that our audit replaced a post-election logic and accuracy test that was part of the requirement that the election officers already had to do. So some of those procedures did change, but we sort of worked it into an existing requirement to do post-election testing of the equipment, and we're able to achieve two goals.
Well, I wanted to sort of amplify a little bit and to strongly agree with what Doug's talking about and the importance of sort of thinking about why are we doing this exercise. And the reason that I do is that a critical part that I discovered, a part of the audit concept, is how the sample is drawn. We've had several presentations that have addressed that. And when we talk about how the sample is drawn, we sort of go beyond random selection. That's sort of a given. But it's an issue of how large the sample needs to be, whether it's of precincts or batches or machines, whatever the case may be. But it's how you select the sample. And by that I mean sample design it involves a number of strategic things that you do. For example, in our state, I reported that we did some comparison of voting machines. You may have noted that the percentages of the different types of voting machines in our sample weren't the same. And statisticians know that if you're going to do a good job of comparing, how the performance of one voting machine versus another, and they're disproportionate, then you have to sample strategically so that you select about the same number of precincts, say, of each type of voting machine. My point here generally is that the sample design and indeed the quality of the audit process is dependent upon knowing precisely, and with emphasis on that word precisely, how we intend to use the information at the end. And I hear a variety of uses circulating, all of which are perfectly valid. And I guess what we need to have in our directives to those doing the audits is a very clear statement of what we're going to try to do with this, what we're going to try to learn from this sample that is used for our audit.
We have time for a few questions.